My single favorite Paul Newman moment is in the movie The Sting when he somehow out-cheats a cheater at poker.
Four nine. Four jacks.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your rainy Saturday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. The 9th entry in our ongoing series simply called The Great Movies. Tonight I'm going to talk about a real unicorn, a comic caper that nevertheless took critics and audiences by storm when it landed literally on Christmas Day, 1973. Dating myself here, but Christmas Day, 1973, I was born 4 days later. So this movie predates even old me. The film is George Roy Hill's magnificent caper crime comedy, The Sting, starring two of the great movie stars in the history of cinema, working together for the second and, unfortunately, final time, Paul Newman and Robert Redford. So The Sting is a film that is fairly well known, even among young audiences. You've probably heard the music, the kind of ragtime score by Scott Joplin. It is more likely that boomers, Gen Xers, elder millennials have seen this film, although it did have a fairly lengthy run on Netflix last year. It is a movie that has been discovered by a lot of the kind of younger movie reactors on YouTube, all of whom have been dazzled. So the thing is, it's a period piece. The Sting is a movie that's now almost 51 years old, but it is set in Depression era. Is it Chicago? I mean, it kind of moves around a little bit, but it is set 40 to 50 years before it was produced. Similar to Roman Polanski's Chinatown, a film from 1974 that is set in the mid to late 1930s. So the period details are timeless. The Sting, while there are certain elements of the story that are dated because it is 2024 and there are certain characters that they probably wouldn't have behaved in exactly the same manner today, The Sting is timeless. It is a classic story of good guys, bad guys, worse guys, and sometimes people who might bend the law. It's enough that their heart is in the right place and that they want to punish somebody who is way worse than them. Because our intrepid heroes, Paul Newman as Henry Gondorff, and Robert Redford as, I love the name, Johnny Hooker. What a great name, Johnny Hooker. But they're con artists. They are professional thieves. But even professional thieves can be the good guys. When you have somebody like Robert Shaw's Doyle Lonnegan, who is not just a massively wealthy and successful gambler, crime boss type, but he's a bad guy. And I guess you could say that the Johnny Hookers and Henry Gondorffs of the world, they are trying to take your money, but they will not deprive you of your life. They'll just take you for your bankroll and leave the rest, leave the scraps for everyone else. They are not malicious people unless you consider the art of being a con man to be in and of itself malicious. But in this sort of story, con artists are the good guys. And Robert Redford's character of Johnny Hooker, his partner, as we open the film and meet, is played by James Earl Jones's father, the actor, the late Robert Earl Jones, who is very, very solid as they pull a kind of short con on an unsuspecting patsy. And the thing is, you can be a dirty, horrible, awful criminal, and nobody's going to feel bad if you get taken. Maybe the police will want to investigate. But Doyle Lonnegan, as played by Robert Shaw, and for reference, he plays Quint in Jaws, if the name isn't necessarily ringing a bell. He's the guy that they hire to kill the shark. And Steven Spielberg loved Robert Shaw, even though that was not Spielberg's first choice to play Quint. He wanted Sterling Hayden, an actor that I really like. But Hayden had some kind of strange IRS issues or tax issues, and he didn't want to have any more reported income. It was something stupid. And they went with Robert Shaw, and I think the film was for the better, because as much as I love Sterling Hayden, I feel like Robert Shaw was better suited to the part of Quint. But in the world of this movie, it is difficult to imagine another actor hitting the marks as well as Robert Shaw. His line readings, the ice-cold look in his eyes, he's amazing. But what I was saying about when somebody is really dirty and just an awful human being, but there are moments where even if you have a, pun intended, a stacked deck in your favor, there are moments where you might come to the immediate conclusion that you've been cheated. But how can you go public? How can you say that when you attempted to cheat the other guy? You can't. And so in the world of this film, this extraordinary movie, which for huge stretches plays like a straightforward comedy. Like, you have these moments of despair and anger, and we have to make things right. But there are long stretches of this film where it is broad humor. There are so many great character actors in this film, and Charles Durning and Eileen Brennan and people like that, who are Charles Dierkamp, another actor, a very interesting face. He was a former boxer. Paul Newman does not have it's Robert Redford's movie. Technically, he's what you would call a nominal star. But Newman has such a way, it's difficult to explain. But as much as Robert Redford has shown, because Paul Newman's a better actor than Robert Redford. He had far more range. But we've seen Redford in movies like The Natural, which I've talked about on the channel a couple of times, that Redford had a particular brand of magic unique to him, that in a certain kind of role, there was nobody better than Robert Redford. In a different kind of role, there was no one better than Paul Newman. And Newman doesn't really show up for at least the first half hour of this film. And the two guys, we assume, oh, they know each other, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They're already writing partners as the movie opens. In this film, Johnny Hooker knows of Henry Gondorff, but they're not buddies. They don't know each other. Each guy knows of the other. And then they decide to work together to settle a really vicious score. But Newman takes over this film. From the moment he shows up, he basically stamps it as, this is mine. This is my movie. Unlike the following year in The Towering Inferno, it's almost the inverse. Now that I'm thinking about it, Irwin Allen's Towering Inferno, about a 170, 180 story skyscraper that is on fire. And how are we going to get all of the people out who haven't already burned to a crisp or jumped to their deaths? It's pretty grim stuff. It's not a movie that would be made in a post 9/11. I know that for damn sure. You would not be making this movie now. But in that movie, Paul Newman appears to be the star. He appears to be the star. He's the architect, put the building up. But once you get to about an hour or so into the movie, there's really not much for Paul Newman to do, and he pretty much recedes into the background. And Steve McQueen, who had kind of a one-way rivalry with Newman, Newman didn't have a problem with McQueen, but McQueen didn't like the fact that Newman was going to get top billing and there were problems. But McQueen essentially takes over that film. It's his movie. The Sting feels like it's a Robert Redford film, and then Newman makes it a Paul Newman film. And there is a scene in this movie that, for me, it is a top 10 greatest scene. I can't really say in the history of cinema. There are a lot of movies I haven't seen, but in my fairly extensive experience as a New York University Film School graduate, as somebody that has read a lot of books and has studied a lot of cinema from around the world over time, I even know a lot about silent film, but how often do we really get to talk about the shot construction of Sergei Eisenstein? The mise-en-scène of F.W. Murnau. You don't really get to talk about it that much. But there is a scene in this film where Paul Newman, and it's a sting. The word sting in this case, it's like the last pull of a con. When you are going to finally take down your mark. Whatever that means. Because in a different context, the Sylvester Stallone film, Assassins, the mark is somebody that he's supposed to kill. In this film, the mark is the person that they are going to sting. In this instance, they are going to take money from him, not without him knowing about it, but they're going to take money from him in such a way that he can't say shit. And that essentially, mild spoiler, happens to Doyle Lonnegan twice in this film. The first time is when Paul Newman, in a cockeyed way, is attempting to gain Doyle Lonnegan's confidence by showing himself to be a big drinker, a guy with a lot of money, Henry Gondorff, and somebody who runs what amounts to an illegal sports betting, horse racing, gambling den kind of place, which I don't think it was really legal during Prohibition or during the precise era that the Sting is set. But nevertheless, the men are on a train, and Doyle Lonnegan is famous for high stakes poker. They don't play Texas Hold'em like you see on TV today and on the internet, where you have guys playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes into the millions on a single turn of the cards. But given that this is supposed to be set 80, 90 years ago, they're playing big fucking stakes. So there are, as we know, poker movies, hell, rounders, where we at least see part of a hand. We see what Matt Damon's Mike McDermott holds at various moments, big key moments in the film. We know what he holds, but we don't know what, for example, John Malkovich's Teddy KGB holds in two, well, more than two, but the two main big hands in the film. We don't know what Malkovich's character holds. So the first con that is pulled by Henry Gondorff and Johnny Hooker, working as a team on Doyle Lonnegan, is this train poker game. And they're not the only two players. There are other people involved in the game. So we know that Doyle Lonnegan, he has a dealer who is going to cheat on his behalf. And Robert Redford and Paul Newman discuss this. They know the guy is going to try to cheat. He's going to cold deck you. He's going to cold deck you. Cold decking is a real thing in poker, but usually it means it occurs through natural means. A cold deck would be if you and I are playing Texas Hold'em and I get dealt 2 kings and you get dealt 2 aces and I go broke. Kings are the second best starting hand in Hold'em. Aces are the best. That's a cold deck. Another version of a cold deck is what this film sets up, which is that Doyle Lonnegan in 5-card draw is dealt 3 nines and then he throws 2 cards away and he gets the 4th 9. Paul Newman's Henry Gondorff is dealt 3 threes, then he gets the 4th 3. Statistically, the odds in 5-card draw of losing with 4 of a kind, I hate to use the phrase, my old buddy Ray Ziegler from Bev's Gym, you got a better chance of meeting Jesus than having 4 of a kind get cracked. It's just not going to happen. But in the world of this movie, we see both characters' holdings. We know that Lonnegan is about to cheat. Newman, as Henry Gondorff, knows that he's about to cheat. So Paul Newman is dealt 4 threes, and Robert Shaw's Doyle Lonnegan is dealt 4 nines. We see this as the audience. All of the money gets in the middle. It's a lot of money. It's tens of thousands of dollars. It would be a lot of money in 2024. Newman's got 4 threes, and Shaw's got 4 nines. So when all the money gets in, and Robert Shaw, with the faintest outline of a smile, says 4 nines. Now, we just saw Paul Newman's hand 10 seconds prior. He has 4 fucking threes. He is beaten. He's got 4 threes. Lonnegan lays down 4 nines, and Paul Newman, with a stogie and a smile, goes 4 jacks. And he puts down 4 jacks. Now, I have no idea. The movie does not give us any clues as to how this happens. But it is an absolute scream, no matter how many times you watch it, because it doesn't make any sense. We don't know how he did it. And the Robert Shaw character in the succeeding scene says the obvious. What was I supposed to do? Get angry at him for cheating better than I did? I couldn't very well call him out for cheating, could I? That is the top 10 scene. It is one of the great individual sequences in the history of cinema. The character of Doyle Lonnegan, though, has deep pockets, even though he takes a horrendous shellacking on this. The guy's got a shit ton of money. And there are various subplots in the world of the movie The Sting where there appears to be an assassin that may or may not be trying to bump off either Henry Gondorff or Johnny Hooker. We don't know that he necessarily, the assassin, works for Doyle Lonnegan, but he seems to be connected. Like he's not going to get bumped off. But they put together this elaborate ruse. They put forth a front that Paul Newman really does have, that his character really does have this gambling den that is legitimate, that they are getting, how do I explain this? They're getting results before anyone else. So, for example, if you bet on the 3rd horse in the 4th race, that's the horse that's going to win. Like they're getting the ticker before it would even be possible. There's some kind of almost like a tape delay scenario in the favor of preferred gamblers. So that's basically the sting. That's the setup. And there is a sense of fun. Despite the number of killings, there's a lot of murder. It's not really that bloody, but there is a lot of murder and mayhem and double crosses and possibly triple crosses in this film. But it adds to the entertainment factor. Like there's nothing that happens. There are moments where we're in shock, where we're on the edge of our seats with suspense. Is Johnny Hooker going to get bumped off? Is he going to turn? Has he already turned on Henry Gondorff? Is this character on the level? Is that character on the level? All of these plot threads and all of these questions at the same time. But as much as these contortions of plot and Robert Shaw's incredible performance and Ray Walston he's the guy that's calling the numbers out, a great performance. And I forgot the name of the actor who plays Kid Twist, but I have to look this up. He was fantastic. Kid Twist. I don't know why they called him that. Harold Gould. I can't believe I forgot the name of Harold Gould. But they had all of these people setting all this up, but with all of the great supporting performers. Charles Durning is so great in the movie. He plays basically a cop who's trying to bust Johnny Hooker, but he's not exactly corrupt. He's not in on the fix one way or the other. He's actually on the level. He's just an asshole. It's that kind of thing. But this is another film where if you want to say, what is this ultimately about? It's about two movie stars. The film is about two movie stars. It's about Paul Newman and Robert Redford. Having fun, working together. I much prefer this. There are plenty of people that have Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid as, top 5 all-time Westerns, top 10. The film never did anything for me. I love Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. There's some great, very realistic sequences of gunplay. I don't think the movie's that great. I'd put Dustin Hoffman's Little Big Man above Butch Cassidy, and there are plenty of people that think that film is overrated. The Sting is about two movie stars, and at a particular time in their career, because Newman was starting to play slightly older. His hair had gone gray, had started to go gray, and he was playing the older guy in this film. He had played so many times the young buck. Redford was still playing the young buck. He was still on the rise as this film came out, even though I think it's 4 years after Butch Cassidy. The Sting had a budget, according to Wiki, and I don't know that these numbers are real, because you can Google this and come up with something different. That's why I say that. But The Sting ended up winning 7 Academy Awards. The budget was projected, according to Wiki, between $5 and $6 million. And this film, in its initial theatrical release, it landed at the end of 73, but it ended up being the highest grossing film of 74. It made $156 million worldwide. That is insane. But it shows that even though this is an R-rated movie, audiences went to see it, and it's the kind of film that fostered incredible word of mouth, where people said to their friends, you won't believe this movie, you have to see it. And there are those that would argue that this film should not have won Best Picture. The Exorcist made a greater imprint on the public consciousness. But sometimes it's okay for this kind of movie to win. A movie that tells a great story, a somewhat lighthearted story of vengeance, but a well-earned vengeance, and not a bloody, brutal vengeance where the bad guy is going to just get his head blown off. This is not Road to Perdition, Paul Newman's last really great role, his last Oscar nomination for supporting actor. That's a story of vengeance also. Paul's character is involved on the wrong end of the vengeance. And there's only one way for that movie to end. It's going to end in death and mayhem. This movie may or may not. I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it. But 7 Academy Award wins, including Best Picture, Best Director, Adapted Screenplay, the musical score by Scott Joplin. Just an amazing film. And one that, if you sit down to watch it, you don't have to, you need a lot of patience. There are films of the 70s that contemporary audiences, they have to be patient with, because it takes a little while, like the wind-up. They say, they could have cut 5 minutes out of this. This movie starts at breakneck speed and barely pauses for breath. Maybe the only time it pauses for breath is the sequence when we meet Paul Newman's Henry Gondorff for the first time. Now, in the kind of storied careers of Newman and Redford, I think The Natural is Redford's best performance. I think that his turn as Roy Hobbs is by far his best piece of film acting, where it is a character that actually has an arc. And Redford, not the most expressive actor, not somebody who was known as a master thespian, but somebody who could hold a close-up, who could show very expressive face. I don't even know if I would have this in my top 5 favorite Redford performances, but Henry Gondorff is definitely in my top 5 Paul Newman performances. My father would always say The Verdict, Sidney Lumet's extraordinary courtroom drama from the early 80s. He thought he had Verdict. He would have said that was his favorite Paul Newman film. He loved that movie. And not a film that you would expect to have a rewatchability factor. Dad must have seen that movie 10 times. But I think Dad preferred Butch Cassidy to The Sting. My father, as you all know, was a huge movie fan. But The Sting is an all-timer for a reason. There are those who would say maybe it shouldn't have won all those Oscars. But hey, 1971, The French Connection won a shit ton of Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director and Best Actor for Gene Hackman. Clockwork Orange was the best film of 1971. Are we kidding? Dirty Harry is a better movie than The French Connection. That is a hill I'll go down on. I won't argue that Clint gives a better performance in Dirty Harry than Gene, his buddy from Unforgiven and Absolute Power, does. But Dirty Harry's a better movie than French Connection. I'm sorry, it is. And A Clockwork Orange is the best film of 1971. So yeah, it's not impossible for the Academy to overpraise or give accolades to movies that, not that they're not deserving, but there are better films out there. I don't have a problem with The Sting winning Best Picture over The Exorcist, though. I don't. It's okay. I can accept that. You want me to say I think The Exorcist is a better movie? It's certainly more difficult to watch. It's horrifying. And not even in the horror movie way. It is a horrifying film. All of the medical stuff that young Regan MacNeil has to go through. Horrible, horrendous, awful. But I think that The Sting is, in fact, a worthy Oscar winner. And if it was overpraised, in my opinion, just by a little, just go on YouTube and you'll see how many of the movie reactors seeing The Sting for the first time cannot believe how good it is. This is a great film with two of the greatest stars in the history of cinema. In the late, great Paul Newman, and he's still very much alive, Robert Redford. This has been episode 295 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your rainy Saturday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,